Honora is not an announcement, it's a confirmation. The kind of movie that certifies for a commercial audience what some already knew about its writer-director Sean Baker, that he's the humanist filmmaker of our time. And despite his hot streak on awards night, he doesn't need a trophy to validate his place in the current landscape of cinema. I mean, it's not what you come to expect from your average Best Picture winner. It doesn't pander, nor is it even cinematic by conventional standards. It's a neon strobe light, R-rated adult comedy that blindsides you with a heavy dose of the real world, like a whirlwind night of ecstasy and champagne before footing you with the bill and a pounding hangover the next day. What I love about Sean Baker is that his movies capture a feeling that no one else can. His particular kind of drama highlights fringe American stories from unconventional walks of life, and they always come from a place of neutrality. Take Red Rocket, for example, starring Simon Rex as a washed-up adult film star who moves back to his hometown in search of his next hustle. He's funny and charismatic, but extremely deplorable. He lives and thrives in a moral gray area, but where other filmmakers would urge you to cast judgment, Sean Baker's only aim is to tell humanizing stories about those who exist in the margins of America, doing what they can to just get by.
Often when you do have a subculture or microcosm that has not been represented much in our media, it's done in a way that's very one-dimensional. And my whole goal is to do the opposite with that, to have fully fleshed out three-dimensional characters that audiences can connect with, see themselves in them.
His signature style is an offshoot of the working-class dramas of Italian neo-realism. He's often praised for his ability to make grounded movies that feel like they're plucked from real settings in America. He shoots on location, he loves casting local non-actors, allows them to improv, and most importantly, his themes explore unsung communities whose stories aren't always represented in media. It's that commitment to authenticity that makes intimate stories feel gigantic in scope. But to me, his biggest achievement is about the smallest of people. A slice-of-life drama that follows a young girl named Mooney, played by Brooklyn Prince, through the shared communal experience of families who live in motels on the outskirts of Disney World. Acquired from the Cannes Film Festival by A24 at the peak of their rise, the Florida Project cemented Sean Baker as the signature indie filmmaker of his generation. The kind of movie that radiates color and emotion, doles out tragedy and sweetness in equal measures. It is, for my money, his most essential classic. It still stands as the most clear-cut definition of a Sean Baker movie. The Florida Project has two interweaving viewpoints, the children and the grown-ups. First, we're going to talk about the kids. While it has elements of a conventional dramedy, the Florida Project is pretty light in terms of actual plot. This laid-back narrative style is sometimes referred to as slice of life, a snapshot of daily existence in a clearly defined place and time. In this case, a hot summer in Central Florida, shown through the lens of a little girl and her pint-sized posse of motel kids. Heavily inspired by the Little Rascals, Baker's intention was for the Florida Project to mirror the summer experience for a lot of kids in America. For Mooney and her friends, summer means unsupervised playtime in a sandbox they aren't quite old enough to understand.
The man who lives up here fought in some wars, and he drinks beer. This guy has a disease that makes his feet hard. These are the rooms we're not supposed to go in. But let's go anyway!
Spending their days beneath cramped stairwells, ice cream stands, an abandoned housing tract, each seemingly mundane setting tells a story about class and community, without overstating the childhood innocence that's baked into the heart of this movie. Even the visual composition plays into this. Tilted shots that emphasize the simple splendor of fireworks in the night sky, striking colors on stucco walls. It's a beautiful representation of that time in your life when colors appear brighter and more vivid than they probably ever will. Upon rewatch, it never fails to stir up nostalgia for the endless summers of my own childhood, running around with friends getting into trouble. For Mooney and her gang, who were born into a socioeconomic status they have no power to change, summertime is an escape. And while their parents and guardians try to keep them blissfully unaware of what's going on, reality always closes in. If children are the lens through which we see this movie, the adults paint the whole picture for us. Not just Willem Dafoe, who kills it as the crotchety old building manager with a soft spot for kids, but primarily Mooney's young mother Haley, played by Bria Vinite. Her nuanced characterization is what makes The Florida Project a Sean Baker movie.
What?
All of you kindly leave, please. Thank you.
You can't do that. I have the 45. Are you serious?
Listen to you and your child. No wonder you're in this situation. Please leave the property. Right now, leave.
She's a tough-minded, high-strung single mom who struggles to make ends meet. Although she has a good heart, her volatile nature makes it hard to be perceived as a positive influence in Mooney's life. Unable to hold stable employment, Haley provides for her daughter through illicit means, from sneaky backdoor lunch hookups to selling bootleg perfume, to hooking up with tourists and occasionally stealing from them. With qualities that aren't easily defined on a binary scale of good versus bad, Haley's written as a complex individual with relatable human flaws, a common motif for Sean Baker, who's earned his reputation as an empathetic storyteller. And empathy is a feeling that runs two ways. On one hand, it's easy to judge Haley for her seemingly indecent lifestyle choices, but it's even easier to relate to her feelings of desperation when stakes are on the line. All while trying to give Mooney the uninhibited zest for life that every kid deserves. Few better options exist when you're reduced to a life of poverty under the long shadow of Disney World, whose presence looms large over the micro-community in this film. The Disney parks play a central part in the Florida Project by personifying the theme of yin and yang, two opposing dynamics that exist simultaneously. I see Haley and Mooney's bifurcated experiences as an allegory for the burdens that exist right outside the walls of the happiest places on Earth.
Anaheim's a tale of two cities. When we first started covering Anaheim for Voice of OC, the big argument was that all of the money in Anaheim was spent on the northern part of the town. The south part of the town does not get the investment. The only investment it gets is police.
It's a really compelling dynamic, an empire of dreams and wonder, mere blocks from an impoverished community. A telling choice by Sean Baker, outspoken critic of corporatized distribution models. That unwavering indie spirit ripples through all of his work, from Tangerine to Anora, each one offering its own grounded viewpoint on the people discarded by antiquated ideals of the American dream. The Florida Project expresses that outlook in a crushing final sequence shot covertly at Disney World with no permits whatsoever. It feels in itself like an act of rebellion, not just as social commentary, but also as a rejection of fairy tale endings. His endings are bittersweet affirmations where devastating truths come to light, like sometimes generational poverty is inescapable, and maybe Cinderella stories don't always work out. But where there's a hard lesson, there's also a light to be found in the unlikeliest places. The little things, mundane as eating ice cream on a hot summer day, or hearing your own voice through an oscillating fan. By giving fair representation to the joys and trials of real communities, he destigmatizes the alternative human experience in a world whose tolerance only narrows by the day. And to me, his historic run at the Oscars is just a moment in time, one that places high value on art that invites open conversation about hidden worlds we're not always privy to or comfortable talking about.
By telling human stories, by telling stories that I hopefully are universal, meaning that anybody in the world can identify with our lead characters, it's helping remove the stigma that's applied to this livelihood, that's always been applied to this livelihood.
From sex workers to motel residents, his movies open the aperture for human stories with light touch and radical empathy. That careful balance of humor and pathos sets the Florida Project apart as a watershed movie that implores us to spare some goodwill for those leading life in the margins of a hollowed-out America.